Derek Carr may miss the 2025 season, and the New Orleans Saints need to move up for a quarterback in the draft. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso, with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the legacy, Louis DiBiase. On today's episode, the Steelers have a big decision ahead here. The New York Jets as well. Flacco back to the Browns and basically kills a Kirk Cousins deal. But we'll start with the massive news over the weekend that Derek Carr is uncertain for 2025. Before we get into it, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day, and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in the show. But Louis, the news broke over the weekend about Derek Carr, and of course, my guy, the mastermind, Ross Jackson, was there to break it down.
This might be the end of the New Orleans Saints' darkest timeline. I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. Now, with respect to people who have been Saints fans far before the New Orleans Saints golden era began back in 2006. There were some dark times before that period. But when it comes to the modern era of New Orleans Saints football history, the combination Dennis Allen, Derek Carr era might be and go down as the new darkest timeline. Since the expectations were super high around this team following a historic output through the first two games of the 2024 NFL season, this team went on a 7-game losing streak, fired its head coach, completely revamped its coaching staff, and now the future of Derek Carr is in question because of an injury before the 2025 season even gets a chance to begin. The New Orleans Saints are very close to turning a page and moving into that full rebuild everyone's been waiting for, which will officially end the darkest timeline in New Orleans Saints modern history.
I gotta say, I think Ross is overdoing it a little bit there with the darkest timeline stuff. But I will say that Derek Carr really limits your ceiling. I think he's, an average quarterback in the NFL. I think, he's not bad, but he's just average, and there's a limited ceiling. So even if it means that the Saints win less games this year because they don't have Carr, I don't see how that's a bad thing for them.
No, it's a blessing in disguise. And I kind of get where he's coming from of it being kind of the darkest timeline in franchise history, because at least back in the day, they were terrible. And at least that can help catapult a rebuild. Whereas Derek Carr and Dennis Allen just kept you in this, not even a Steelers like purgatory where you're winning 9 games. It's like that 5-7 win purgatory. And that's just
even worse.
The worst place to be in, like picking 9th overall. There's no hope there. So I think they were already in the quarterback market with Derek Carr. I think we knew this was going to be his last year in New Orleans, but this really now, I think, pushes them forward all the way to commit to this quarterback class. I think Jackson Dart makes, even over Shedeur Sanders, would make so much sense for this football team. I think that's the kind of quarterback Kellen Moore would like. And I think Derek Carr being out now, I think it puts added pressure on them they have to add a quarterback. They can add a veteran, but I think they were already interested. And now this for me is a slam dunk. They're going to be in on this quarterback market.
Well, we know that they were already interested because they sent an insane amount of people from their organization to go look at Cam Ward. I'll just say this though, man, they have 9, 40, 71, 93, 112, 131. They have a lot of picks. They have 4 picks in the top 100. It would probably be pretty easy to pair 40 and 93 and jump up a couple of spots. I mean, if you're the Raiders and you want to take Ashton Genty or something like that, do you think the Jets are going to take Genty with Breece Hall, who they don't even want?
And you want to take a tight end like Tyler Warren, they might be willing to move down a few spots.
I think Carolina is a prime team to move down with this if the Saints stick at 9, because teams will want to jump in front of New Orleans to get Shedeur if it's time to actually do that. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think that the Saints have the draft capital, and now they have the impetus that if they really do like Shedeur Sanders, and I do think in a dome in New Orleans, he would fit there. And I think if you look at Kellen Moore, I think he could get the most out of Shedeur Sanders there with his offense and manufacturing touches for people outside, stuff like that. So I could see New Orleans making a little bit of a jump from 9 to 6, getting in front of the Jets and getting in front of anybody else who wants to jump in front of them and securing Shedeur Sanders. I see Jackson Dart, but I think Jackson Dart is really far away from being ready to play. I just think Shedeur Sanders is so much further along in terms of being ready to go out there on an NFL field. I agree that Dart is more talented, and I think that Kellen Moore would take those traits. But I think if Derek Carr truly is going to miss the 2025 season, and Kellen Moore in New Orleans, they never want to tank, dude. That's why they're always that 5-7, because they refuse to sit down. They want to win games. I could see them making a little bit of a move up to get Shedeur rather than dropping back a little bit and getting Dart, because then you have Dart and Rattler, and I don't think either of them can win any games.
My rebuttal would be, though, when you're drafting a first-round quarterback in the top 10, it's not about year one. Like, the Derek Carr injury, to me, should not impact your evaluation process at all. It should be about who do you believe long-term is the face of your franchise, not who can get you to that 7-win mark in 2025. So I totally get where you're coming from. For me, I don't think any of these guys are worth moving up for, but if they do identify Sanders or Dart as the guy, I think you will see a small trade up just to guarantee that another team doesn't try that, right? So I don't know how far they'd have to get up the board. It probably would be 6 or 7. I don't think you can get inside the top 5, even if like New England doesn't love Will Campbell, or Jacksonville is like, we missed out on Hunter and Abdul. I still don't think those guys are going to move down. I think you got to get to probably 6 or 7 just to guarantee your guy. I just think Dart, I think it's too rich for a top 10 pick. I don't think he's that kind of player. But I just think when you look at the kind of quarterback Kellen Moore has worked with, like Jalen Hurts last year, I think Dart compares to Hurts a lot. I think that would be the style he prefers. But it's going to be interesting. I think no matter who the guy is, the Saints are all in on this market now, because you can't go into the season with Spencer Rattler as your starter.
Right. I think it's interesting if you look at it. Would you rather have Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah.
Or would you rather have, say they take Dart, they trade up for Sanders at 6, they take Dart at 9. Would you rather have Shedeur Sanders, or would you rather have Jackson Dart 43 and 9 or 40 and 93? You know what
I'd rather have that.
Case for Dart.
That's the thing is, I think Dart, I like Dart as a prospect better, and I don't think you're going to have to trade up for him like you might have to trade up for Sanders.
Right.
Honestly, I think they could probably sit at 9 and get their pick of both. I don't think anybody's coming up, but when it comes to quarterback, if you identify a guy, you are going to try to guarantee you get that player. It's different than other positions. I don't think they're going to have to, but I think just like, it's almost like when Chicago in 2017 traded up one spot just to guarantee they got Mitchell Trubisky, right? I think they would end up doing that.
See, I think the biggest takeaway for me of this Derek Carr news is how it screws the Saints if they wanted to sit and pick. I think that cat is out of the bag, and now the whole world knows how bad they need to get a quarterback.
Yeah, the leverage is gone.
Yeah, and that makes it less likely that they can just sit and get their pick. I honestly look, Kellen Moore came from Philly. Whose skill set is most similar to Jalen Hurts? It's Jalen Milroe.
That's a fair point.
Would New Orleans drop back a little bit, get some extra picks, take Milroe higher than people expect, but because they get the extra picks from the trade down they made, it makes it more worth it to him because now they can build around him. And now you have an excuse to play Milroe early on and get him out there even though he's not ready. It's like, hey, Carr's out, like, what are we going to do? And it just gives you a free year to develop Jalen Milroe. That, I think, would also be pretty. I agree with you that I think most of those options are better than trading picks up for Sanders, but it's all about how they rank the quarterbacks. But with that in mind, speaking of quarterbacks, poor Kirk Cousins running out of places to go. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. And look, I didn't know this, and now it's totally changed the game. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You could turn any TV into a gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, and sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. You can dive into hundreds of premium titles, like one of my favorites, EA Sports College Football 25, Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Just as easy as you stream all your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. I love how portable it is, because instead of lugging around a big console, now at a fraction of the cost and the space, I can have all of my favorite Xbox games. It's super affordable. Again, just bring your Fire TV Stick 4K device, and you're ready to go. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. All right, Louis, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We saw another quarterback move over the weekend, or got more quarterback news over the weekend, I should say. Joe Flacco going back to the land. Cleveland, this is for you. Joe Flacco back with the Cleveland Browns, 1-year deal. They now have Kenny Pickett, and they have Joe Flacco. And, what in the world are the Browns really going to do at quarterback?
I think they're just kind of doing what the Giants are doing. It's an insurance plan that they have some sort of starting experience at the next level. You never know how the draft's going to go. But I do think when we're talking about teams that are guaranteed to be in on this year's quarterback market, talk about a team that could try to trade back into day one for one of these players, whether Sanders falls down the board, Dart, you mentioned Jalen Milroe in segment one. I think Cleveland, even more than the Giants, because Russell Wilson can be, I think, get you through an entire season. I don't think Pickett or Flacco can. These moves I just think are to kind of hedge your bet. But I think Cleveland, if I'm confident in any team taking a quarterback that's not your Tennessee Titans, I think it is Cleveland, even if it's not with that second overall pick.
Yeah, for sure. I think they absolutely, and with them sitting at 33,
yeah,
I
think the first pick in the second round, right? Exactly.
In this, which is basically a first rounder, and in this year's draft, we've heard that there's top tier talent. There's about 8 to 10 guys, depending on who you listen to, you believe. There's 8 to 10, 11, 12 first round talents, but after that fall off, the guys from 15 to 65. It's a flavor of the week situation. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's what you like and what your preferences and your scheme fits and the traits you want for your different roles. So I think with that, it'll be cheaper to move up from the early second round to the back end of the first. Because if you're the Eagles at 32, I did a mock trade and a mock draft for the Titans for my show, where the Titans and the Eagles flipped 32 for 35 and threw in an early day 4 or day 3 pick. And the Eagles are like, why not? There's 8 guys that we all find the same. So I think it'll be easier to move up into the back end of the first round for the Browns or the Giants at 33 and 34, or even the Saints at 40. You know what I mean? The Jets at 42. The Jets at 42.
I believe so.
I think we're going to see more than quarterbacks going early. I think we see a heavy move late in the first round to go up and get quarterbacks. And that includes the Browns. It's just, if you add Sanders, Dart, Milroe on the board and you're the Browns, who do you take? Who do you go up and get?
I think Sanders, when we were talking about team fits for these prospects, I think Jackson Dart fits more in New Orleans. I think Sanders makes a lot of sense in Stefanski's offense for the Browns. I think that's the kind of style of quarterback that he likes. I could totally see them also falling in love with the idea of bringing back that Colorado duo of Sanders and Travis Hunter, that they take Hunter with that second overall pick. I don't know. I'm very curious. I feel like Sanders could go as high as 2, but he could go all the way down to 32. I could totally see the Eagles, like you mentioned, in 2018, they traded down with Baltimore. They come back in to get that 5th-year option for a quarterback and a rookie contract is really important. They got Lamar Jackson with that pick. I could see Cleveland doing that, but I don't know who would be on the board at that point. Because like I said, I could see Dart going as high as 9 or not being a day 1 pick. And I could see the same for Sanders and even Jalen Milroe, who accepted his draft invite. Is he expecting to be a day 1 pick? But I think, gun to my head, Cleveland would be the most interested in Sanders in a vacuum, regardless of how possible it is to get him on top of Hunter.
Yeah, I think that having him and Hunter just kind of, what it does more than anything is it removes the stink of Deshaun Watson.
Right.
Like the narrative of the team is no longer, hey, look at that grave that Deshaun Watson dug, or look at that grave that Haslam dug, whatever you want to say. Like, we're just looking at a tombstone of this version. That would totally revamp the vibe around the Browns. It would create a fresh new era. We're moving away from that. The comments from Haslam about how, like, hey, we made a mistake, like, that's on us. Like, to say that while Watson is still on the team, that's insane to me. So the only way that you can move off of that and not let that black cloud hang over your team is to move to Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter or whatever that create a totally different feel around the team. But really the big loser from this Joe Flacco move more than anything is Kirk Cousins. And my guy Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons talked about that.
Joe Flacco might have just killed the Kirk trade. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. The Cleveland Browns on Friday morning signed quarterback Joe Flacco to a 1-year, $4 million contract, possibly eliminating themselves from the Kirk Cousins trade sweepstakes. Now the Browns and Flacco have a cheaper bridge quarterback option in the event that they take a swing on a rookie quarterback in this year's draft. The Falcons have been holding out hope that the Browns would turn to Kirk Cousins after the draft for that same bridge role, with reports that Kirk Cousins wants to wait until after the draft to waive his no trade clause, since he wants to be a starter and is worried about a pre-draft trade to a team like, say, Cleveland, and then they subsequently use their top selection on a quarterback, and he'd find himself in the exact same situation he found himself in Atlanta when they took Michael Penix Jr. with the 8th overall selection and began a ticking clock on Cousins' time as a starter. But in this case, patience does not seem to be a virtue, and the most promising destination for a Kirk Cousins trade has seemingly dried up. Does this now mean that the Atlanta Falcons are stuck with a $50 million backup quarterback in 2025? Well, it seems likely. So for more coverage of the ongoing Kirk Cousins saga that does not seem to have any end in Atlanta, make sure you follow Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to my guy Aaron Freeman, who every time we hear from him on this Kirk Cousins thing, he just, I wouldn't be shocked if there's like a, someone behind the scenes talk about Kirk Cousins again. Do it. You know what I mean? Do it again. It's just misery there. And I do think that the Falcons have completely botched this, trying to be petty. Like, we just don't want to admit defeat on this one. We're going to wait. We're going to hold out. And now I just don't see how Kirk Cousins is good enough to get a team to who is going to trade for Kirk Cousins for him to be a starter with no competition. Like, this narrative that Kirk Cousins wants to wait until after the draft to go somewhere, it makes sense in theory, but why would any team bank on Kirk Cousins without a younger option? He is to the point in his career, like Ryan Tannehill refused to do this, and that's why he doesn't have a job. You are going to be a mentor for the rest of your career if you want to be anywhere, Kirk Cousins. So acting like you can wait and hold out to not have to do that is foolishness. Like, yes, you're going to have to do that.
Yeah, he hasn't earned that right in the last few years to have that kind of leverage or power. Like, I don't know who he thinks. Even Aaron Rodgers, it's annoying the power he has, but it's more justifiable than Kirk Cousins. I mean, that guy hasn't really been a viable, really solid starter since, I'd say, 2022. So I think you get that a lot, though, with these quarterbacks that have been starters for a long time. They are unwilling to accept their fate as a bridge quarterback that likely will not start more than a few games a year. And I think Kirk's in that boat, especially after just signing a huge contract in Atlanta, where he goes home, for where his wife is from, and he thinks like the contract didn't say he was going to be a bridge quarterback. The Penix trade was, his defense, it was a shocker. I think he would have not signed in Atlanta if that happened. So
they snaked him for sure.
Yeah, I get where the sensitivity would lie, but also like have some self-awareness. You're 36, 37 years old. You have no mobility. You're less than 2 years removed from a really serious leg injury. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of unrealistic I feel like it's not justified for him to be upset about his current situation.
No, I agree 100%. But I think the reality here is, and I don't want to seem like, like I'm, grandstanding. We all have our flaws, but I think the reality is professional athletes typically are the last to realize that, they aren't valued the way that they see themselves. And I get it. Very rarely do people be like, yeah, I'm actually not worth that anymore. I'm not that good. But there is a line between confidence and self-awareness that you have to have. And I think if Kirk Cousins was more willing to be a mentor and more, it would open up his options, and a team like Cleveland maybe would have taken a chance on him. But the fact that, and we haven't heard this from him. We've heard reports that he doesn't want to do this, and that's why he's waiting. But at the end of the day, I just think he's hurting himself. You're right, by not understanding where he's at, because it's going to limit his opportunities because he's making unrealistic demands that the market aren't going to provide. But with that in mind, unrealistic demands, Aaron Rodgers making those. And also, I just want to ask, should the Jets really go with Justin Fields over a guy like Shedeur Sanders? Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you, again, by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're going to look at a draft prospect, pick one guy that stands apart, the guy we believe showcased strength and power needed to push an NFL team forward as we look ahead to next season. And this week's Armada clear-cut Player of the Week is Shedeur Sanders, who we're talking about a lot on today's episode. Great accuracy, obviously stepped up in big moments. He's got the swagger that you need, heavy duty, rugged. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, you're going to be able to go forth and conquer with confidence, and that's exactly what Shedeur Sanders is going to be able to do, again, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada and any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles like the Armada, the Rogue, the Pathfinder. Go and find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. All right, Louis, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the uncertainty in New Orleans with Derek Carr's injury and their draft options. Talked about Joe Flacco and how it impacts Kirk Cousins, him returning back to the Cleveland Browns. But now I want to move forward to Steelers conversation, but more a former Steelers quarterback in Justin Fields, who went to the New York Jets. And I know that the Jets, I don't think it's very likely that the Jets take quarterback at number 7. I don't think that that's going to happen. And I don't think a lot of people think that that's going to happen. But that's exactly why I think it might happen. And if Shedeur Sanders is there at 7, my guy John from Locked On Jets, he doesn't think that they can pass.
I do think at some point the Jets will draft a quarterback under Aaron Glenn, and I think that that guy will take on a leadership role. But my guess is because Glenn's in year 1, he's kind of trying to establish his own thing here. If you draft a quarterback high in the first round, that guy becomes the face of your franchise. I'm not sure that's where Glenn wants to go this year. That's not to say he'll never draft a quarterback, but that's my guess would be it would be something more like Detroit and try and build your team and establish the fundamentals. That said, I could not rule out the Jets drafting a quarterback, and I think more than anything else, the reason I don't think the Jets are going to draft a quarterback is I don't think there's going to be a quarterback prospect available at 7 who will justify the pick. I go up and down. I go back and forth on Shedeur Sanders. I do think he might be the exception, though. I think that if he's available, then you could take everything I just said and throw it out. When I said that stuff about what I think Aaron Glenn's going to do, that's under the assumption Shedeur Sanders is not going to be there. My guess, and this is just a guess, I'm not saying I have any insider information on this. My guess would be that Shedeur Sanders could be the exception because he's got that starting experience. And so if he somehow fell to 7, I think there would be a possibility there.
That is interesting. So if you're the Jets and Sanders is there at 7, are you taking him? Are you riding with Justin Fields and kind of hoping you can get the most out of Fields?
I'm not taking Sanders. I like Justin Fields, and I recognize in another class that had stronger prospects, like maybe even last year, for instance, you could argue a lot of those prospects have a better chance at this point in Fields' career of being the franchise guy than Fields.
Right.
But I still think, considering his age, seeing somebody even like Sam Darnold last year develop later on in his career, that there is a better chance Justin Fields could be the Jets franchise quarterback than Shedeur Sanders. Again, with Sanders, there's nothing special for me about him as a prospect. I know the name carries a lot of weight. He's a very good processor. He's an accurate quarterback, but where is the elite traits in Shedeur Sanders? Does he have a higher floor at this point? Maybe, but Justin Fields has a high floor too. He has that mobility. He has the arm strength. And I do think maybe there's still a chance that he can develop the other parts of his game like Darnold did later on in his career. So I'm not saying Justin Fields is going to be the Jets franchise quarterback. I'm not saying, he's earned the right to continue to be this guy that teams keep giving chances, but I saw growth from him as a pocket passer in Pittsburgh last year. And considering this year's class, if I'm New York, I would just run the tables on him for a year. And, if he kind of just plateaus and is who he's been, then next year, maybe like you kick the tires on another quarterback. But I wouldn't take Sanders at 7. I would take like a Tyler Warren type and kind of try to give Fields like as good of a chance as he can get.
So I think there are a couple of things. We don't know what the Jets want to do this year. You know what I mean? Like, are behind the scenes, they're saying, hey, we know that we got to build this. It's year one of a new culture. Fields is limited. We're probably not going to be a playoff team, but maybe we hit gold with Fields and then we can start building this thing forward and ride with him for a couple of years. Let's just see, with no expectations. No one's getting fired.
Right.
But if that's the case, then yeah, I'll ride with Fields. But if behind the scenes they're saying, hey, we're going to win games this year. We think we can be a playoff team. There's talent on this roster. I'm sorry, but where I disagree with you is I do not believe in Justin Fields. I don't think that Fields is anything more than a backup. I think he's a solid backup. He's a dynamic backup, but I just don't see him as, I think he could have a Tyrod Taylor career, basically. In the back half of his career, he's just a known backup, but he's solid. He wins games. The legs give you something dynamic in your backup. I think he'll be a high-paid backup. But with Sanders, the traits that I would say are elite, one is elite toughness. The dude really does hang in the pocket and get smoked and throw the ball with a bad offensive line in front of him. Like, he's willing to sit in there, and I do think that he is incredibly accurate. Now, my thing is the fit with the Jets. Like, if the Jets played in a dome, then I would feel different. But outdoors, the weather, it makes it tough. So I think in a vacuum, I would say the Jets should not pass on Shedeur Sanders if he's there at 7, because I don't really believe in Justin Fields. But I think it would be hard to have the maximum value of Shedeur Sanders' career playing outside because of the arm limitations. So for that reason, I couldn't do it.
I'm not saying too even that Fields is ever going to be like a top 10 quarterback, but I think he could be a poor man's Jalen Hurts, where if you really commit to his strengths and run this RPO centric play action style offense, and you bring in a Tyler Warren and he's got Garrett Wilson, and the Jets have a better offensive line. Like, they finally have some pieces that they didn't have in recent years. I just think his ceiling still, for me, might be a little bit higher than Sanders. And again, that's not saying I believe in Fields as a franchise quarterback. Comparatively speaking, though, if it's one or the other, and like you said, the pressure that comes with a first top 10 pick in that round that you don't really have with Fields, I just think it makes more sense to just give Justin 1 year and then maybe focus on next year's class. But, at the same time, at 7 for Sanders, I don't think that's bad value at all.
And the one thing that I can hear Aaron Glenn saying, we didn't plan to be this high again. We didn't plan, you know what I mean? Teams say that stuff like, we didn't plan to be that high. We'll take the quarterback now. We won't be high, So it'll just be, the Jets are one of those teams that I think everybody's told themselves is not taking quarterback. And every time that happens, maybe that's the team that does. You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see. Real quickly with the Steelers, Rodgers is going to go there. Which rookie do you think? Let me ask you this. Would you trade up for Sanders, let's say, to like 13 with the Dolphins? Would you stick and pick Jackson Dart at 21? Or would you trade back to 32 with the Eagles and take Jalen Milroe? Which of those options do you think is the best?
I would absolutely move down to 32 for Jalen Milroe. I just think at that point, because there's no pressure for him to come in right away and start, and he could get a year or two of development on the bench. You kick the tires on the elite traits that, Milroe has a long way to go compared to these other prospects from a, progression standpoint, accuracy, mechanics. Like, he's got a long way to go, but he's got 2 A+ traits that are very important for a modern day quarterback. And people roll their eyes. Everyone says arm strength, mobility, but when you have that, and in such an unknown that is quarterback evaluation, most teams are going to be willing to give those guys a chance. And especially when there's no pressure to start in Pittsburgh, if Rodgers is there, which he's going to be, I would actually like to trade down, collect assets, and take a chance on Milroe compared to just sticking and picking with who I like Jackson Dart, but I think it's worth the chance with Jalen Milroe.
No, I'm with you there. It's like having a good cut of steak. In my opinion, it's like as long as I have a good cut of steak, I can work with that. If my sides are subpar, if blah, 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 like I can build the meal. We can do this. It may take a little more effort, but I'm with you there. I said that earlier or last week as well. If I had the choice between those three options, I would trade down for Milroe as well, because Milroe and picks and the potential there, let him sit behind Aaron Rodgers. And me and Ross talked about it, and I kind of convinced him. Rodgers' ability to win in the pocket and get rid of the ball quickly in the way that Rodgers has to play now.
Sure.
If Milroe could play like that with the skill set that he has right now, he would be nasty, like I actually like that better than Dart and Rodgers, even though people see like the natural gifts and stuff like that. I like it better than Dart and Rodgers, Milroe and Rodgers on the Steelers.
And I know that people are going to say, look at the Anthony Richardson type of prospect. Like, are you really going to take a chance on another guy that's so raw like that? But for me, if you're not willing to take that kind of guy, you're not going to be willing to take a Josh Allen type coming out of college. So I think it's always worth taking a chance. Even if you miss on those guys, I will never fault a GM for taking a shot.
Lamar Jackson.
Exactly.
Pick 32 because people had concerns about him being able to win from the pocket and blah, blah, blah. And I think Lamar is a better prospect when he got drafted than Milroe was. That was just a better quarterback class. But still, the point remains, like, bet on traits sometimes, and especially if you're trading down and getting value and you know that you have Aaron Rodgers.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's not a top 5 pick like Richardson was at 4. I think it would be a good move for the Steelers, and it just seems like it would, I don't know, just feel Bama to Steelers. It just seems like a good fit.
It does.
It does feel right. It does. But with that being said, that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. For me, your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, my co-host, the Legacy, Louis DiBiase. As I tell you every episode, thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.